it must stop preventing them from implementing their mandates. The OIC calls for the implementation of all UN resolutions, namely the General Assembly resolution on the implementation of the advisory opinion of the ICJ. That calls for an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory. In this connection, we commend and support the resumption of the UN high-level conference on the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question and the implementation of the two-state solution. The Palestinian cause remains a fundamental pillar of fruitful cooperation between our two organizations. And our common priorities include the following: a ceasefire, humanitarian access to mitigate human suffering in Gaza, the provision of international protection to the Palestinian people, and the mobilization of the
ومهمتها الأساسية مع الالتزام التام بالقانون الدولي وضمان احترام الجميع.
Respecting international law and all UN resolutions in this domain and those pertaining to Palestine. Our partnership is a strategic one to promote the two-state solution, to put an end to the Israeli settlements and occupation, both of which are illegal and long-standing. Our goal is to adopt a just and lasting and holistic solution and to allow the Palestinian people to restore their legitimate rights, including the right to self-determination, the creation of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state within 1967 lines and with East Jerusalem as its capital. We are working closely with the United Nations on the situation in Afghanistan. We've worked on this for namely since 2021. The OIC Special Envoy to Afghanistan has attended all the meetings of the Doha process held by the United Nations and explained the OIC's position on important issues, namely human rights and the rights of women and girls. He also has discussed inclusive governance, the fight against terrorism, and drug trafficking. He continues his engagement with UNAMA and the United Nations officials, as well as with the international community, to hold discussions and stage effective coordination. Moreover, the Special Humanitarian Trust Fund for Afghanistan, under the aegis of the OIC and the Islamic Bank for Development, signed several partnership agreements with UNICEF, the OIM, and the WFP. The Islamic Organization for Food Security continues to cooperate with the United Nations to help UNAMA and the UNODC, as well as UN Women. Indeed, this cooperation is fruitful. However, we need more cooperation with the international community to overcome challenges in Afghanistan. The OIC is ready to broaden cooperation to this end. I wish to reiterate that the OIC's efforts in Afghanistan continue on the humanitarian front through constructive dialogue with the de facto authorities on issues that are covered by OIC resolutions, namely those pertaining to women's rights, girls' rights, and the fight against terrorism. The OIC is closely following developments in Syria and renews its unwavering commitment to the unity, sovereignty, and independence of Syria. We call for a Syrian-owned and Syrian-led transitional process. We urge the international community, namely international humanitarian organizations, to step up their efforts to resolve the humanitarian situation in Syria in order to promote the reconstruction and recovery. We call upon the Council to call upon Israel to put an end to its repeated aggressions against Syria. They threaten regional peace and security. As regards Yemen, the OIC reiterates its commitment, its staunch commitment to the unity, sovereignty, and the territorial unity of Yemen. We reject intervention in its domestic affairs, and we fully support the efforts to bring about a political solution in accordance to with various texts adopted, the ICJ initiative, the Arab initiative, its implementation mechanisms, the conclusions of global national dialogue, and Security Council resolutions, namely 2216. In this regard, the OIC reiterates its support for the UN Special Envoy in Yemen in terms of finding a political solution in Yemen, one that will put an end to the Yemeni crisis. We call for efforts to be stepped up to halt the suffering of the Yemeni people and guarantee the delivery of humanitarian aid to all affected areas. Turning to Sudan, the OIC expresses its grave concern at the armed conflicts which continue. We reiterate the importance of preserving security and stability in Sudan with full respect for its territorial integrity and sovereignty. The Sudanese people have to take decisions about their own future. We need to have peace, but achieving that peace involves an inter-Sudanese solution which respects Sudan's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and its unity. All of this requires a ceasefire and a solution which brings about stability and socioeconomic development. In this regard, we need to engage to implement the agreement signed on the 11th of May 2023 as part of the Jeddah Roadmap. We must heed the appeals being made in that agreement to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Sudan. The OIC attaches the utmost importance to the situation in Somalia, the Sahel, and Lake Chad. There, we face humanitarian and security challenge. For this reason, the international community must demonstrate solidarity with the countries concerned. We reiterate our commitment to continuing to support these countries as they counter terrorism and violent extremism and to promote security, development, and stability in their countries. We'll do this by tackling the root causes of the crises while at the same time assisting national governments in their efforts to achieve peace, security, and sustainable development. Mr. President, concerning our strategy within the OIC to prevent conflicts and build peace, as well as our fight against poverty, all of this work is based on our close cooperation, on our understanding that there is a close relationship between peace and socioeconomic development. We need to tackle conflict's root causes. That is why the OIC supports the UN agenda in terms of fighting against terrorism and violent extremism, intolerance, Islamophobia, stereotypes, and incitement to hatred. In this connection, we hail the General Assembly Resolution 76/254 that declared the 15th of March the International Day to Combat Islamophobia. We commend the appointment by the Secretary General of a special envoy to combat Islamophobia. We are ready to fully cooperate with the new special envoy. A military escalation was recently seen in South Asia, and that was following attacks against Pakistan and the Azad Jammu Kashmir in 2025. That reaffirms the following realities. Peace and security in Southern Asia cannot be achieved without a lasting holistic solution to the Jammu and Kashmir conflict in accordance with the Security Council resolutions. Moreover, we commend the ceasefire announced on the 10th of May 2025, and we call for full commitment to implement it and in favor of bilateral agreements, namely that over the Indus Waters area. We support the UN strategy to fight against terrorism, to take measures to counter the threats, the new threats in the field of terrorism and emerging threats, as well as the incitement to hatred and extremism, and particularly hatred on religious grounds. We call for a fight to be waged against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. We reject all attempts to link terrorism to a specific ethnic identity, religion, culture, country, or nationality. Mr. President, the Rohingya and the Muslim community in Myanmar remain among the OIC's priorities. It is a very complex challenge, not only for the OIC and the UN, The OIC continues to support the fundamental rights of the Rohingya people, namely the right to a nationality. This is in accordance with the resolutions of the two bodies in this field. We hail the close cooperation between the two parties. In this regard, we express our grave concern at the challenges hampering the voluntary, safe, dignified and sustainable return of Rohingya refugees to Myanmar. We hope that this cooperation can be stepped up to ensure that the high-level conference on the Rohingya is a success. That's scheduled for the 30th of September 2025. Its goal is to step up international efforts to bring about a holistic, just and lasting solution to that crisis. Mr. President, turning now to security challenges, the OIC reiterates the importance of international cooperation to create a nuclear weapons-free zone and one free of other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. That's important because it is the first step in bringing about regional and international peace and security. And it's also important to allay fears regarding the nuclear program in our region. So we need to step up efforts under the aegis of the United Nations to guarantee that all countries in the region commit to respecting international law and the NPT for a stable, safe Middle East and one which is free of the nuclear threat. Mr. President, a meeting is held every 2 years on cooperation between the OIC and the United Nations, the most recent of which was in Astana in Kazakhstan in July 2024. These meetings are effective in terms of identifying areas for partnership and for periodically reviewing cooperation between the two organizations. This bilateral arrangement has strengthened cooperation and the exchange of best practices. The OIC and the United Nations continue this bilateral cooperation in the humanitarian sphere in a very active way. They do this by drawing on the principles and values common to the two organizations as enshrined in their respective charters. The OIC has taken action with a number of UN humanitarian agencies, UNHCR, OCHA, and the OIM. This joint work has been facilitated by the signing of memorandum of understandings and joint action plans. Consultations continue with UNDP to establish partnerships. That work has made it possible to notch up several achievements. Thanks to these agreements, I also wish to indicate the conclusions of the first ministerial conference of the OICA on the refugees in the Islamic world in 2012 in Ashgabat in Turkmenistan. That was jointly organized with the UNHCR. There are common initiatives between the OIC and the UN that have also made it possible to step up humanitarian action everywhere in the world. We hope to increase our cooperation in terms of mediation, conflict prevention, and electoral observation. On the economic track, the OIC works with the UN agencies. The UN is continuing to support the OIC in facilitating access of a member country to the global economy. This partnership also aims to increase global and sustainable development, the economic empowerment of women and young people. All of these are among the priorities of both the OIC and the United Nations. However, international security remains one of the linchpins of both organizations' work. Regarding women's empowerment, the OIC and UN Women in March 2025 signed an MOU. That text confirmed their common commitment to promote the rights of women and their empowerment. That partnership strengthens dialogue on policies, capacity building, and the various initiatives to increase women's participation. The OIC attaches the utmost importance to capacity building among young people and to their participation at all levels. We also need to protect young people from dangerous ideologies which incite terrorism, extremism, and violence. Young people need to be provided with the right information. As such, they need to have access to knowledge. What's more, we have robust partnerships with UN agencies such as the WMO, UNICEF, and others. These partnerships have made it possible to strengthen our joint priorities in terms of health in various countries. This involves working on healthcare systems, access to medicines, vaccines, and the fight against health challenges. Maternal health, child health, non-communicable and communicable diseases. This partnership, including with the WHO, has allowed us to build member states' technical capacities in terms of preparing for epidemics, radiology, and vaccination, and protection from radiation. We have common bedrocks, namely the conflict prevention and peace building, social justice, and sustainable development. We commend achievements made in these fields within the United Nations, namely the UN peace-building architecture. Several of our members have been donors to these initiatives or have been beneficiaries thereof. There is also support being provided in post-conflict phases, support that is offered by the Islamic Development Bank and various special humanitarian trust funds under the OIC umbrella. These trust funds help countries affected by conflict. I wish to turn now to the future. The two organizations can bolster current cooperation and increase it. This is important given that the world is increasingly turbulent. There are more and more conflicts, humanitarian, economic, and social crises. The environment is worsening. As such, we need to step up multilateral action to overcome challenges. We have one choice that we can make. That is the choice to work together in a strategic, ambitious, and complementary partnership. Allow me, Mr. President, to underscore three key areas of focus, which in our view deserve a bolstered partnership in the future. One, conflict prevention and mediation. The two organizations have robust mandates when it comes to conflict prevention and mediation. We work in the same ways to resolve the same crises, but we seem to be working in parallel. So we need to coordinate our efforts through mechanisms, namely when it comes to early warning systems, the crisis analysis. We also need there to be preventive diplomacy and mediation as joint endeavors. Secondly, sustainable development and humanitarian action. The OIC and its specialized bodies, namely the Islamic Development Bank, play a key role in terms of financing for development, humanitarian aid, and economic cooperation. We need more cooperation to counter poverty, to provide social protection, to empower women, young people for innovation, to counter climate change, and to mitigate the dangers posed by natural disasters. On the humanitarian track, there needs to be more coordination on issues related to refugee aid and humanitarian financing. All of this is of crucial importance. Thirdly, and finally, dialogue, tolerance, and the fight against hate speech. Given the major challenges faced in these areas, namely in terms of peaceful coexistence, and given Islamophobia, radicalization, and hate speech, which are gaining ground, we need to bolster our cooperation to promote tolerance and human understanding. It is incumbent upon us to fight together to counter hate speech and to strengthen a culture of coexistence. Mr. President, we need to work together to protect international peace and security in line with the UN Charter and the Charter of the OIC. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Aldabay, for your briefing. The two complementary briefings by Assistant Secretary General Khiari and Assistant Secretary General Aldabay provides a comprehensive overview of the wide-ranging cooperation between the UN and the OIC, the important work that the OIC is undertaking across regions and across numerous domains to promote the objectives of peace and development. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, it is a distinct honor for me to preside over today's meeting of the Security Council on the cooperation between the United Nations and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, known as OIC, a subject that resonates profoundly with our multilateral vision and with the collective aspirations of the over 1.9 billion people whom the OIC represents. I thank the OIC Assistant Secretary General Mr. Yusuf Al-Duwai for traveling from Jeddah to brief the Council. Also thank Assistant Secretary General Khalid Khiari for his valuable briefing. We meet at a moment of deepening global disorder. Wars waged with impunity, occupation sustained without accountability, humanitarian crises multiplying, and ideologies of hatred fast becoming normalized. Amidst prevailing flux and deepening uncertainty, the urgency for coordination and principled action has never been greater. Pakistan firmly believes that in this fractured world, the OIC stands as a key political actor, and its partnership with the United Nations must be strengthened, deepened, and further institutionalized. The cooperation between the United Nations and the OIC is firmly based on Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, which highlights the significance of regional arrangements in supporting the Security Council's primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. As the second largest intergovernmental organization after the UN, the OIC has consistently served as a bridge connecting the global with regional efforts and aligning political with the humanitarian priorities. Its legitimacy derives not only from its vast and diverse membership, but from the principled clarity of its mandate to uphold justice, protect human dignity, respect national sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all member states, and advance solidarity among nations. Whether in championing the right of the Palestinian people for freedom and statehood, in advancing for the rights of the people of Jammu and Kashmir for self-determination, and end to the prolonged illegally occupation by India, or in supporting peace efforts across Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and Sahel, and beyond, the OIC has been an indispensable interlocutor for the United Nations, also deeply attached to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. Pakistan holds this partnership in the highest regard. As a founding member of the OIC and a staunch believer in effective multilateralism, we are of the view that this engagement must transcend and evolve into operational synergy. That means early warning systems informed by ground realities, joint mediation frameworks built on trust, and sustained political and technical collaboration that delivers tangible impact on the ground. Excellencies, the General Assembly, during its 79th session, adopted Resolution 79/9, reaffirming the relevance of the UN-OIC partnership and calling for stronger institutional linkages and strategic cooperation. The OIC's regional presence, cultural sensitivity, and political legitimacy allow it to respond swiftly and credibly, especially in contexts where global mechanisms are constrained or absent. The depth of the UN OIC engagement continues to grow, from mediation in political transition to coordinated responses in humanitarian emergency to advocacy on issues of disarmament, development, and protection of religious and cultural heritage. This progressive transformation into a proactive, multi-dimensional partnership underscores the maturity and scope of this relationship. The potential of institutional linkage remains much more in this regard. Excellencies, nowhere in this cooperation more necessary than in countering the rising tide of extremism, particularly the alarming resurgence of Islamophobia. Religious hatred is not only morally indefensible, it strikes at the very foundation of the UN Charter. The international community's endorsement of Pakistan's initiative to designate 15th of March as the International Day to Combat Islamophobia, followed by the adoption of a resolution leading to the appointment of a UN Special Envoy on Islamophobia, are milestones that reaffirm our shared resolve. The OIC has long been a strong voice on this issue, and we must further institutionalize its role in global efforts to promote respect, inclusion, and interfaith harmony. Excellencies, today's interaction is both timely and necessary. Let us recall that this Council has convened briefings on UN OIC cooperation in 2013 and 2016 and adopted a presidential statement in 2013 recognizing the OIC's constructive role. We must embed this cooperation in regular, durable, and structured mechanisms that reflect mutual trust, institutional coherence, and a genuine commitment to shared responsibility. The OIC is a vital partner in the international peace and security architecture, particularly in theaters where the UN's reach alone has proven insufficient. Similarly, on the important issue of UN Security Council reform, as the largest cross-regional organization, the OIC member states have called for adequate representation in any category of an expanded Security Council in line with the OIC's long-held position. Excellencies, Pakistan hopes that today's dialogue will be a catalyst for fresh thinking, renewed commitment, and bold action. Let us be guided by the Charter, grounded in principles, not geopolitics, and propelled by the conviction that global challenges demand global partnerships. Cooperation between the United Nations and the regional organizations such as the OIC is not a diplomatic accessory. It is an indispensable imperative. Excellencies, before I conclude, I wish to thank all delegations for their constructive engagement in agreeing on a presidential statement to be adopted at this meeting that will go a long way in further strengthening the partnership of cooperation between the United Nations and the OIC. I thank you all. I now resume my functions as President of the Council, and I'm happy to give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also thank Mr. Youssef Al-Dubey, Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs of the organization.